Welcome to the Old Testament survey, where we get an overview of the whole Old Testament. And this is lesson number 1, where we get an introduction to the Old Testament. Sponsored by the Institute for Biblical and Scientific Studies, and you can get more information at www.bibleandscience.com. And I'm your teacher, Dr. Stephen Myers. Here we have a great overview of world history and biblical history. And there's some key dates here to remember. Around 2000 BC, we have Abraham. And Egypt is in dominant control of Canaan at this time. Moses about 1500 BC. And then about 1000 BC, we have the United Kingdom, we have David. So there's 1,000 years between 2000 BC and 1000 BC where Egypt is control of Canaan. Then we go with the United Kingdom in 1000 BC with David, and it splits apart into the northern and southern kingdom, Israel in the north, Judah in the south, and this is around 930 BC. You can think of it something like in the United States you have the north and the south, and there was a civil war, and they split apart. Well, the same thing happened back in 930 BC. Then another key date is 722 BC. This is when Assyria came, attacked the capital of Samaria, and destroyed the northern kingdom of Israel. It was not able to capture Jerusalem, and Judah stayed on as an independent nation until 586 BC, when Nebuchadnezzar came, the king of Babylon, and destroyed Jerusalem in 586 BC. In 612 BC, Nineveh was destroyed and fell. So these are some key dates. Abraham, 2000 BC. David, 1000 BC. The division of the north in the south, 930 BC. Then the fall of Israel, the northern kingdom, at 722 by the Assyrians. And then 586 BC, the fall of Jerusalem. Memorize these key dates. This will help you in biblical history. Here we have some more key dates for biblical history. We already discussed 586 BC, the fall of Jerusalem. Babylon is ruling. In 539 BC, Babylon falls to Cyrus the Great. We have the great Persian Empire in control. We have Ezra in 458 BC. During this time is also Esther. In 445 we have Nehemiah, all during the Persian Empire. Then a key date, 332 BC, we have Alexander the Great, and the great Greek Empire comes to power. In 323 we have Alexander's death, and it's divided among the generals, and we have, especially affecting Israel, we have the Seleucids who rule from Syria, and then in Egypt we have the Ptolemies who rule, and they sort of fight over Israel. And so sometimes Israel is controlled by the Seleucids, and other times it's controlled by the Ptolemies, and it's fighting back and forth. Until 167 BC, there's the Maccabean revolt. Judas Maccabees defeats Antiochus, and they become an independent state. And we have the rule of the Hasmoneans until 63 BC, when Pompey comes and takes Jerusalem, conquers Jerusalem. And now we have the rule of the Romans on into the time of the New Testament. So these are key dates here. We have the fall of Babylon in 539 and the rule of the Persian Empire. 332 BC, we have the Greek Empire with Alexander the Great. In 167 BC, we have the Maccabean revolt and independence. And then in 63 BC, we have the Romans taking over. These are key dates to remember for especially Old Testament history. We want to take here a complete overview of the Bible. We have the Old Testament and we have the New Testament. There are 39 books in the Old Testament, 27 books in the New Testament. The Old Testament looks forward to the coming Messiah, to Christ's coming. In the New Testament, we're looking back at Christ's coming. So these are two key things to remember about the Old Testament and the New Testament. The Bible divided into two main parts. The Protestant Bible is made up of 66 separate books, 39 books in the Old Testament and 27 books in the New Testament. The Roman Catholic Bible also adds the Apocrypha books. The main theme of the Bible is salvation. The Old Testament looks forward to the coming of the Messiah. The New Testament looks back at Messiah's coming. And then in the book of Revelation we have looking forward to the Messiah's return again. The Old Testament is arranged topically, not chronologically. When I first read through the Bible, I thought it was all a story, a continuous story chronologically. But it isn't. It's arranged topically. You can divide the Old Testament into 4 groups. The Law, the 5 books of Moses, also called the Torah. History, 12 books. Poetry, 5 books. And the prophets or prophecies, 17 books. The Old Testament is divided up into 4 main parts. There's the law, history, poetry, prophecy. When I first read through the Bible, I thought it was just starting from Genesis, the beginning of time, and then ends right before the New Testament. And it was just like a timeline story. But it isn't. It's divided up topically. This happened with this Greek translation called the Septuagint. They arranged the books of the Old Testament topically. So it's not just one chronological story at all, but arranged topically. And you have the law, the first 5 books of the Bible is Genesis, Exodus, Leviticus, Numbers, Deuteronomy. The 5 books of the law, or Moses. Then the second division is history, the history books, 12 books. And then you have the poetry section of 5 books of poetry. And then, which includes Job, Psalms, Proverbs, Ecclesiastes, and Song of Solomon. The last division is prophecy. 17 books of prophecy. You have the major prophets and the minor prophets that make up this section of prophecy. So remember, it's divided up topically into these 4 divisions: law, history, poetry, and prophecy. The ancient Jews divided the Old Testament, their Bible, which they called the Tanakh, into law and the prophets. They also divided it in 3 ways: the law, prophets, and writings. And the writings were the Psalms. The law was called Torah, or the first 5 books of the Bible. So you have a different division and a different collection and order in the Jewish Bible, the Tanakh. And we see even in the New Testament the 2 ways the Jews divided it into either the law and the prophets, or they made a 3rd division: law, prophets, and writings. Luke 24:44 says, "And he said unto them, These are the words which I spake unto you while I was yet with you, that all things must be fulfilled, which were written in the law of Moses, and in the prophets, and in the Psalms concerning me." So in this verse we have the threefold division of the Old Testament. In this slide we can see more clearly how the Jewish scripture is divided. We have the 2 ways they divided it. One, the Torah or law, the 5 books, and the prophets, in Hebrew, Navim, 17 books, or in 3 ways of dividing it: the Torah, the prophets, the Navim, and the writings, called the Ketuvim. And the word Tanakh, their word for all of Scripture, is an acronym for taking Torah, the Navim, the prophets, and the Ketuvim, the writings, and putting that into an acronym, the Tanakh, standing for all of Jewish scriptures. The Jewish scriptures, according to the Talmud, was compiled and brought together in 450 BC by the men of the Great Assembly. We now want to take again a look at an overview of the Old Testament, a timeline. And we begin with creation. We have the fall, the flood, Babel, and then the beginning of the patriarchs around 2000 BC. Then we have Moses, Joshua, Judges. Then about 1000 BC we have the United Kingdom with David and Solomon and Saul. Then after Solomon, there is a split, and there's the northern kingdom of Israel and the southern kingdom of Judah around 930 BC. The northern kingdom of Israel is taken captive by the Assyrians in 722 BC. And they're taken away back to Syria and other lands, and they're called the 10 lost tribes. Then in southern Judah, their southern kingdom lasts longer, and it's not until 586 BC when Nebuchadnezzar comes and captures and destroys Jerusalem, and they're taken away into captivity. And this is the time of the exile till 539 BC, when Cyrus the Great conquers Babylon, and the Jews are set free to return to their land. They return, and we have the time of Ezra, Nehemiah, and Esther. And then there's a 400 silent years until the beginning of the New Testament. Here are some resources, some books that you can go to. I'm not sure about the first two there, if they're still published. There's the Unger's Bible Handbook, and there's several other handbooks available. There's Bible charts, maps, and timelines, Simply Understanding the Bible. And my favorite, because it agrees with my view the best, is The Bible is History by Ian Wilson. For college-level books, there's two good books here. A History of Israel by John Bright, and A Survey of the Old Testament, Introduction by Gleason Archer. Here are two good books for college-level, in-depth look at the history, the introduction and survey of the Old Testament. Congratulations, you have completed the Old Testament Survey Module Introduction. It's created by the Institute for Biblical and Scientific Studies. More information is available at www.bibleandscience.com. And I'm your teacher, Dr. Stephen Myers. Thanks for taking this lesson.